Welcome. You're listening to Doopy Deep with Dr. Nikki.
Let me do this part first. For the record, I want everybody to know, one, I'm always ready to go at 12:30. Two,
water. That's a day that needs to be celebrated. It's a day that you must take deep sips. And so I was trying to get it down.
It's so ridiculous.
So it's important to have a good woman in your life who will help you out when your alliteration falls flat. You better sit before you start.
Because that's the biggest plague of our time. It's, poor alliteration. That's what we're struggling.
That is, I know. Out of all the issues in the world, that's the one we need to focus on the most. Dr. Nikki, we're speaking truth to power today.
We are speaking truth to power, which I'm excited about. So I'm really thinking about this as a continuation of our conversation from last week when we talked about the hashtag Me Too and hashtag Time's Up movements. And I really enjoyed our conversation. I thought we had a pretty nuanced and engaging conversation trying to unpack and look at the problem from different levels, with the different kind of sense of scope about the impact of sexism, and generally speaking around power dynamics in gender, and how that has really is playing out with an event that happened in between last week and this week. As we said in our last show, there's always something breaking news. And there was an event that happened that I thought really kind of intersected and highlighted what we were talking about last week and what I wanted to talk about this week, and that was the Aziz Ansari expose that happened last week. Did you hear about that, Tomas? Were you
heard about it?
In the know?
Yeah, I'm not in the know like Dr. Nikki. I'll tell you that. But yes, I have heard about it, but I'm not. Why don't you bring us all up to speed on that, please?
Sure. So, we have, we're in this, people have used this term watershed moment, right? So we're in this really heightened sense of conversation and examination about sexual assault and sexual harassment in specific. So that's kind of on everybody's radar. And so the part of the conversation has been about, where do we draw the line? How do we really disentangle sexual interactions from those that are normative to those that are problematic, that lead to assault or lead to harassment. And one of the things we talked about last week was, I think for a lot of people that's unclear. So Aziz Ansari is a well-known, internationally known comedian. He just won a Golden Globe for Best Actor for his second season of his show Master of None, which is on Netflix. Aziz has been around for a while, and he's kind of been known in part of his professional identity and in his stand-up as being a feminist, and really being one to talk about the intricacies of dating in our modern context. He has a book. Be clear. Let me make this caveat. In any of these instances that we're talking about, or any instance of sexual assault, at the end of the day, the truth of any incident only lies between the people involved, right? And not just that, but the experience of the people involved. I know that there are legal definitions of sexual assault. I know that there are legal definitions of sexual harassment. However, I know that the individual actors in any situation, a question that hasn't necessarily been directly asked is who gets to make that call? Who makes a decision on whether something is sexual assault? In his interpretation, doesn't come right out and use the word no, stop, or don't, but uses language in her mind that frames around letting him know she's uncomfortable in the situation, and he continues to persist in a sexually aggressive manner throughout the date. Eventually, there's no penetrative sex, there's no intercourse. I think at some point she does get around to saying stop, or that she wants to stop. And so she leaves. He gets her a Uber, and she goes home, and they're honest. And she goes, one of the things that she says, so the title of her op-ed is Aziz Ansari is guilty, period, of not being a mind reader. And what happens is, I'm gonna read directly from her op-eds. She says, quote, "I am a proud feminist, and this is what I thought while reading the article. If you are hanging out naked with a man, it's safe to assume he is going to try to have sex with you." I'm going to leave it there. That's just one piece. And so for me, I think this is where this conversation around where's this confusion, murkiness in the overall feminist community and identifying what feminism is, and be able to that's for me is where the conversation needs to happen. I feel like I've been talking a lot. Questions, thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to that. And I think it's just, excuse me. Oh, wow. Excuse me. Just listening to what you see why I sip? You see why I need to sip? Listening to what you're saying, I think you don't even realize how much it's affected you. And you're in that situation. Maybe you don't know how to navigate those waters and be a good sex positive sexual advocate. Right. If you are a person of color and there is an ethnic difference and you feel as though this person has done something maybe to help your career or help you along. And again, this plays true with all aspects of it, but it becomes even more painfully apparent that this definition is speaking to a very specific
levels of power that come into play when we start a narrow view of what rape is, and anything outside of that context is then just seen as a he said, she said situation, right? Or a situation. And so for people on the feminist side, some of them will say, well, she should have spoken up, she should have said something, etc. The problem with that is I think it causes kind of this intractable tension. Either you say something and because you are a feminist and you're empowered, or you don't say something and that means something is inherently wrong with the woman. And I think the reality is there's a whole lot of people in the middle, and that we have to do some work to think about the people in the middle.
Yeah, but I'm going to take a slightly different view and look at this. I go there. That's not where this conversation should begin. The conversation should begin with the person. I say, well, in which, and we can start at the office of the president. That's why I sit here and I have an uncomfortable.
Why didn't she say something, or why, how would you expect for me to say, why would a woman expect to be naked with a man and not his apartment? She was in tears. And I think that I'm coming from the position of, I do think women have power. I believe women have agency. I believe women should be empowered. And so I'm interested in how do we then have that, I'm a woman. And so and not be judged because of that. Also, whenever they want it from
say, this is what consent is, this is what consent is not. But especially in the case of these Aziz Ansari, you're talking about nuances, you're talking about cues, but more than that, you're talking about a lack of clear to mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. I don't play games when it comes to my bedroom. I don't know about that.
Lord knows. You don't play games in no aspect of your life.
I'm not one for that. I'm a grown man. I do not play those kind of games.
Oh, right? My God.
So if I'm in a situation where someone is being flirtatious and we're going down a road and they're, stop, go ahead on, no, stop, nope, we're just going to stop because I'm not doing this with you.
Yeah.
I'm very clear in what my intentions are. You need to be clear with yours.
One of the things is I want to, ubiquitous term, that a person has the authority to act with power. And then we want to define power as the ability to make others do what we want them to do. So I thought it would be a good idea to have somebody join us today in the conversation whose kind of work and professional work is centered around organizational empowerment, and it's generally used to imply. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit and see if we can bring in our guest. If she's online.
I believe she is. We're going to go ahead on and try to connect with her right now.
She is a very busy woman. She stays on her grind, and she has other important activities to get to today. So we were lucky to get her for a called the South Asian Youth in Houston Unite. And so we are talking, Eesha, today about where this role of empowerment,
reproductive rights, anti-violence. Those are the two areas of work that I have spent the most time in for couple decades now, talking about, well, what do we think the backlash will look like? And particularly in this moment, so there was the question of, so what constitutes sexual? That's what people are saying, is that this isn't a big deal. It doesn't rise to the standard of sexual assault, and therefore it's problematic to name it and to say away, and that's the problem. Instead, it was actually a group of women of color that I was.
And I think the reason why to anticipate the backlash is because what happens is once you start really getting closer to dismantling power structures and really getting into the root of oppressive symptoms, that's when the system pushes back. It's one thing to kind of try to isolate, sexual assault is wrong and sexual harassment is wrong. But the moment we want to broaden the scope to say, hey, this might be a bigger system in which we all are somewhat culpable, differentially depending on our position, but it's a bigger systemic issue, and we are really talking about dismantling systems, is when the whole entity starts to push back, and we can expect the backlash.
And I just want to jump in there real quick and say that, to that point, Eesha and Dr. Nikki, one of the things I've been hearing from people, as you know, I sort of work intersectionally and deal with different people of cross sections. Some of my for lack of a better word, friends in finance are now saying things like, well, this is really going to affect, when I'm sitting across from the table from someone and I'm hiring, I don't know if I want to hire a woman now because they're rigid, oppressive positions.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to understand each other in this context. So there's that. I will say that, this is another good reason for comprehensive sexuality education, is to be able to talk to folks about healthy sexuality when they're young, and horrifying considering what is coming forth now, which is that almost every woman that any of us knows has had a less than great experience